The Nintendo DS is one of my favorite handheld systems of all time. The biggest reason for this was that it released at just the right time with just the right specs to get the kind of games that ended up filling its library. As the consoles were transitioning towards a more cinematic experience sort of thing, leading to the rise of annualization, DLC, and the ever-increasing budgets, both handhelds of that time period stayed fairly modest. With games made for the PSP feeling like they were somewhere between the PlayStation 1 and 2 era, and the Nintendo DS often feeling like the last ride for the Super Nintendo and Genesis era of games in terms of design and scope. The DS came out on top for me because the absurd sales of the system meant that a lot of developers would try throwing anything at it, resulting in tons of shovelware, but also a lot of interesting titles that would have otherwise never seen the light of day. Budgets were small, so viability and financial risk wasn't as big of a deal as on the big systems. Very few games are as good an example of this as the humble platformer funded by EA. Made by a then unknown studio, led by a developer who pitched his concept as a flash game. Today we're looking at Henry Hatsworth and the puzzling adventure. Henry Hatsworth in The Puzzling Adventure follows an adventurer named, well, Henry Hatsworth. During his travels, he finds a magical hat that gives him powers and returns him to his younger, more energetic self. Unfortunately, it turns out that this hat is also connected to a magical puzzle realm, and by wearing the hat, he is now called upon a puzzling adventure. This is not a story-heavy game, though the characters and general flavor do add a nice touch to the experience. For a game as barebones in story and setting, Henry Hatsworth still manages to go ham with what little setting it establishes, which is actually impressive. Games with excuse plots don't often go as far with its own premise, but we'll get to how far it pushes this with the gameplay. The gameplay is, and this is a genuine surprise, more of an action platformer than a puzzle platformer. The name might fool you into thinking that this is a game filled with puzzles, and while this is technically true, you're not expected to push around boxes, solve switch puzzles, or do fetch quests. The first stage even tries to trick you into thinking there will be more puzzles along the way when it makes you use your gun to shoot switches to lull you into a false sense of security, because the real meat of the game is the combat. Henry has a lot of the typical controls that you'd expect from a platformer. You can walk, jump, attack, and fire a gun. Later down the line, you still get special abilities like a wall jump or a dash, but your movement options stay fairly simple. This is not a Metroidvania where you keep getting more kit to unlock new areas. Stages are a straightforward experience where you walk forward towards an exit, jumping over obstacles, pitfalls, and taking down the occasional enemy. Most upgrades along the way are made for the sake of variety and complexity in level design and challenge than they are to promote exploratory backtracking. Where it gets interesting though is the way the game focuses on the combat. You get a basic combo which has a knockback effect on the last hit. Early on, the combo by itself is enough to take out enemies, but over time they'll start surviving that one combo. You can opt for a launcher as your last hit instead, complete with an automated jump if you hold the attack button afterwards. Though you could wait for them to come down before launching them again to get the most out of that aerial combo. There's a low attack that moves your character a bit forward before reverting back in space, and yes, touching enemies when you lunge forward does make you take damage. The attack itself has knockback too, which can knock enemies out of place. Then there's a gun, which fires small bullets, but you can also fire a big special blast that deals a ton of damage. Tons of enemies have special ways to approach them. Some you need to jump in to attack them since they'll come with a low attack the second that you're in range. Some will throw projectiles at you after enough time while holding up a shield to block shots from your gun. And as the game progresses, the more the positions and the combinations start really becoming a pain, as the designers clearly put a lot of thought into enemy placements and combinations in this game. Though they're never too cruel about this. Usually when a new enemy is introduced, it's done in isolation, so you can safely learn the patterns and strategies involved when it comes to dealing with them. There's also a ton of segments where the game just has enemy arenas for no good reason, and it's these moments that the game really shows its true colors as to what kind of action platformer it actually is. A lot of how the screen space is used and how you're fighting for control over enemies with unique ranges, health pools, and timers before attacking is following the traditional beat-em-up rules. If anything, it's following the idea of crowd and screen control the way that a character action game would, well beyond what most beat-em-ups expect of their players. But it doesn't end there. There's a good reason that this game is called a puzzling adventure. It's time. It's tea time.
Good show!
Whenever you take down enemies, instead of dying, they fall down to the bottom of the screen. Down here, you get to play Puzzle League. Over time, the screen starts moving up, and if enemy blocks make their way back up, they'll come back to haunt you, literally. Thankfully, when you enter this screen, the top screen pauses completely, so you can take your time and clear out this puzzle board while some of the best music in the game plays. There's other reasons to mess with this beyond just getting rid of the enemies too. Most of the item pickups like extra lives, health recovery hearts, screen nukes, or enemy freezing effects move to the second screen so you can activate them when you want, rather than when you pick them up. It's interesting to see a game where you can basically bank that extra health pickup while you're still at full health in case you need it later. Oh yeah, also the puzzle board controls your meter. The meter on the left is the timer. If you stay out of the puzzle or attack enemies, this meter fills up. The meter on the right, let's call that the tea time meter. When you clear blocks, the tea time meter fills up. Once it fills up entirely, you get the special powers of the hat, giving you additional silver hearts on top of your regular health pool. This powered up form is your base form, reverting to the lower one once you've taken enough damage, and yes, you do regain back normal health upon powering yourself back up again. So sometimes you want to save up some blocks to make the road back to your stronger self a little shorter. The same meter is also used as ammo for your gun, and as much as it might seem like a bad idea to use the gun too much early on because it uses up meter, the late game really pushes your hand to abuse this thing if you don't want to take damage, so it's still very important. Now, if you fill that meter up a second time on top of the original bar, you get tea time. You press the big T button on the bottom screen and you have a sip of tea with historical figures and fictional characters, while heavy metal music plays. And then you get into the giant robot suit to beat the shit out of anyone in the way while being absolutely invulnerable until your meter runs out. Something that's interesting in replaying this game now is realizing that if this game came out today, the Devil May Cry 5 comparisons would be inevitable. But this game came out in 2009, so the closest we can get to a possible influence is maybe Beautiful Joe for the first transformation, with a powered up form being the standard that you need to regain once you run out. Whether or not it was actually inspired by it, I have no idea, but there's so much here that is completely surprising to see from a relatively obscure Nintendo DS game, even just beyond the genre blend of Puzzle League and action platforming. One of the best examples, and I actually didn't know about this until this replay, is the mechanic where, after firing your gun, you can supercharge the bullet by clearing puzzle blocks on the board before it hits anything. The gun also has two other modes that you get through pickups later on, a bomb and a boomerang, and both also have upgrades by clearing blocks on the board. The bomb just ends up doing more damage, but the boomerang starts homing in on enemies instead of coming back to you. Speaking of the gun, there's also a special shot with the gun button that uses up meter for a stronger hit in your regular combo chain. It uses up meter, but sometimes you really just want to get rid of enemies fast before you get overwhelmed, so it can be worth it. Speaking of overwhelming, Henry Hatsworth in the Puzzling Adventure does something that isn't too common, but should be familiar to those who are really familiar with action platformers or arcade games. Somehow, this Nintendo DS game has engine-controlled slowdown. If too much is happening at once, the game slows down on the engine's side to keep things manageable for the player to respond without input delays or stutter, in exactly the way that Metal Slug games do it on proper arcade hardware. I was playing this game on an emulator to record it, having originally played it on a Nintendo DS years ago, and I tried replicating it by just messing with how much stress my computer and the emulator was under, and instead that would cause actual frame skip and audio stutter and distortion, meaning the regular slowdown is baked into the game in a controlled manner, which is actually impressive, since this means that the developers were aware of the limitations of their engine and coded in a solution. The later stages, especially the final boss fight, kind of need this. And I kind of wonder if the item pickup that supercharges you and leaves behind after images was made this way to trigger the slowdown forcefully during hectic moments to give you superior control over the game, since you'll have more time to react to enemies with this. There's 5 worlds in the puzzling adventure, and with small, lower budget platformers, that would mean there's 5 tile sets. Instead, the individual stages in those worlds tend to have unique visuals to them too, so there's 5 stages per world, and even though most of these worlds will take you about an hour to go through, that hour you're not going to be staring at the same tile sets and backgrounds over and over. There's some really good visual design and diversity going on with the themed worlds here. A lot of the stages are also packed with secrets, and sometimes even secret exits leading to bonus stages, giving you a lot of reason to really explore around and find things. There's a shop between stages where you can buy upgrades. No full moves, just passive upgrades like increased damage for your melee and projectile attacks, but also better meter gain and more health. By the time I beat the game, I didn't max out everything, so this is not one of those games where you just passively gain everything without needing to get some of those secrets. I quite like this design choice, since more often than not games will just have all these secrets out there for you to find, but then even without finding a quarter of them, you'll have maxed out everything you can buy long before the end. Granted, it's just passive stat gains in this case, so the game is perfectly doable without feeling like you're really missing anything, but still. Did I mention that Henry Hatsworth is a hard game? The first 3 worlds or so took me about an hour apiece to complete, but the trial and error at the later stages because I kept making dumb mistakes and being punished for them put my time in the later worlds well above an hour. World 5's final stage especially. I remembered the game being hard near the end, but I was surprised at how fast the difficulty ramped up. It was a steeper curve than I remembered, though not an impossible one to overcome. And that was while I was playing on a decent controller instead of a handheld system. It might actually be harder for some people on an original cartridge. It probably won't be surprising the game pushes back with some of the comparisons that I've thrown out there in regards to how it handles screen control, meter, and slowdown, but still, it's worth pointing out that the game can be very hard. Also, I want to put this out there, but the music is incredible. EA actually put the official soundtrack on their site for free ages ago, when the game was still new, and the official soundtrack release had none of the compression that had to go into the Nintendo DS's version to fit on a cartridge. Unfortunately, this soundtrack is no longer up for download, and both the playlists on YouTube for the soundtrack are incomplete. While I'm working on this video, there's 2 playlists on YouTube and they're both 16 videos long. Tons of stage and puzzle tracks are just missing, as the official soundtrack that was released was 37 tracks long. So, I uploaded it all to YouTube, just now. The whole soundtrack that used to be up on EA's website, I'll leave a link in the description. So, do I recommend Henry Hatsworth in the puzzling adventure? Yeah, I do. The final stages might legitimately be too hard for some people not versed in platformers, and the forced combat sections might not really appeal to people who don't get beat-em-ups. But if these things sound like your cup of tea, you might want to check the game out. Wait, this is the first Western-made game I reviewed, and it's by EA of all companies. What are the developers doing right now anyway? Oh, they're gone, and it's not even EA's fault in this case. They started up their own company after this game, then made Monster Till, then they took a job under The Rat, disappearing from the scene after a lackluster Disney's epic Mickey game on the 3DS. And not too long ago, they actually let their official website's domain expire. That's really unfortunate. Anyway, this was AboveUp, and yeah, this video was supposed to take a week, and it somehow took a bit longer because I wanted to do the soundtrack properly and rip that and put that to YouTube, and you know, things happen. Next time, it's slime time. As always, this video was brought to you by people supporting me on Patreon. If you would like to become one of the names that you see scrolling on the screen, head over to patreon.com/AboveUp, and I will see ya.
Staccato e fortissimo, rubato, allegro, la. Agilmente per recordino, smorfioso tessitura, garbamente gaudeoso. Strada so